Bueller.
Our analytics show people are watching, but then they contradict themselves and say that people aren't listening at all. So who knows? We might just be talking into the void, you and I.
Well, it's not atypical for us, is it?
No, let us go then, you and I, as the evening is stretched out against the sky like a patient etherized upon a table.
Etherized. Oh, there's
It's
your
T.S. Eliot.
daily dose of JDM language nobody knows.
Okay, well, it's from the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock.
Keep on digging.
It's a famous poem by T.S. Eliot.
Okay. Sounds great.
I will spare you the rest of the rather lengthy and quite sad and self-deprecating poem. He was, as we were doing in the moment, skewering himself. So he is T.S. Eliot, and so he invents this pompous character of J. Alfred Prufrock. And it's the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock because he's a lonely, sad man, and the poem is largely about approaching a woman at a party and how he's doesn't find himself able to do that, and compares himself to, crabs on the bottom of the ocean and all kinds of things. So it's a self-deprecating thing. He's clearly roasting himself. T.S. Eliot's roasting himself in this poem to a degree. And I felt that was apropos with our opener about our listenership.
Terrific. Well, I think with that, any of those that were listening are no longer listening.
It's a good thing we don't have the analytics to tell us when people stop listening.
Yeah. Well, it's you need to get to 60 seconds, so at least they're waiting 60 seconds to see when we actually start talking about content. So.
Well, we're 2 minutes in now, so all y'all out there, thank you for hanging with us past the 1 minute mark. After that, neither Apple nor Spotify nor Substack nor anybody else cares whether you listen to the rest. So do us a favor, download the podcast, put it on 2x speed, listen for 30 seconds, and you've got our supported, and that's awesome.
Awesome. Well, let's hop in. Let's do it.
Speaking of us, welcome to Zero to Traction, a podcast ostensibly about how first-time founders create companies at scale, as well as 100-year-old poems that Cameron would do better to know. I'm one of your regular co-hosts, JDM, aka Josh David Miller. As I mentioned, here with Cameron Law. Cam, how are you?
I'm doing good. I'll always enjoy hopping in and having a great discussion around some different startup topics, and then learning new things from poems and whatever you bring to fruition.
Yeah, and I just in the spirit of practicing, what we preach, we spend so much time on the show talking about evidence and the science behind a lot of what we do. And so I figured I might surface here something that I hope that our listeners noticed, but that they very well may not have, which is we've been cycling through the days that we release the podcast, running experiments to try to actually find the optimal day and time to release our show. Podcasts, typically you release early in the morning, so you get the commuter stuff. So like it's a top of feed, when they go to figure out like what they're going to listen to in the morning. It's what I do every morning, even though I don't have a commute most days, or at least not one that's podcast worthy. And so so we have been mostly doing mornings, but we've been changing up the days of the week. Hopefully that hasn't caused too much confusion. But if you have opinions about that, we're always happy to hear your thoughts about that. But this is us practicing what we preach. We're running experiments here.
Boom. Cycles on cycles.
Cycles on cycles on cycles. Bodies on bodies on bodies. Let's get to it. So we are here for an episode that we are calling the Surface as a Software edition. And yes, that is backward. We're going to talk about when your startup is really just a lot of custom work with a UI stapled on top of it, with maybe not stapled, maybe it's got one of those like elementary school glue sticks, the kind where there's so much used behind the paper that it starts to like leak through and become part of of the art itself. We're going to talk about, when founders think that they're building like some really big, nice, scalable software product, but they're actually just building a whole collection of really demanding freelance clients that they're probably calling pilot customers. So there's no repeatability, no scale, and you're really just one onboarding call away from crying into your roadmap. So with that, maybe before we actually dive into the game, because of course we're going to play a game with Zero to Traction. We've got a game that we're going to play in a minute called Platform or Project. But maybe we can introduce the topic a bit more. Do you have some thoughts that you'd like to share, Cameron?
Yeah, well, one, looking forward to the game as always, and getting our live reactions to whatever startup cast throws our way. But I think this kind of goes back to just a general theme that you're going to see across Zero to Traction and the Traction Lab as well, is where we really want this intentionality for building a repeatable process. And so one of the challenges we often see is, yes, you do need to kind of duct tape these prototypes together and have this focus on testing and iteration and going to customers. But one of the challenges you might run into is where you're ultimately creating customized solutions for each of your customers, and that's actually not actually going to lead to this repeatable business model that your theory of you building this scalable startup relies on, you having this repeatable process. And so yes, you want to give yourself that permission to grow and iterate over time, but we also want to illuminate when we feel like we're making traction around building the foundation of our platform, but we're actually just creating customized solutions to our customers' pain points. And so when you start to look across, we're engaging these 3 B2B clients, and none of the platforms that would be ultimately extrapolated would be the same, that leads to a large challenge. Now you don't have this repeatability, because now you go sell the next customer and they want something unique. Now you're building a whole nother product. And so how do you actually scale that over time? And so we want to catch those things earlier on and see, is it something in terms of our offering? Is it something in terms of we're actually targeting different customers, and so we're actually not identifying that early wedge into the market where there's a repeatable nature. And so we need to catch some of those red flags before we get too far down the road and we say, okay, how do we actually scale, when there's really no possibility in doing so, because now your value propositions become different for each of those, as well as you can't actually build this repeatable solution time and time again, because it's requiring a lot of the service and customization that isn't ultimately going to allow you to get to that theory of what your startup is. So I'll pass it back to JDM to add any additional color on that.
Yeah, I think that there's nothing wrong with building a really efficient service business. Like if that's what you want to do, that's great, and you can have technology and IP behind your efficiency, and that's fine. Like that's great if that's the kind of business that you want to build. But if you're after building a scalable startup, then you have to build a scalable startup, and scalability requires repeatability. Repeatability requires predictability, and predictability requires that you can look at a customer number 2 and say that they're just like customer number 1 in ways that are important enough that these 2 customers can leverage the same underlying technology without having to have a conversation, without having to have tweaks, without having to have something different. And so as you're going through the process of identifying what you like, this pilot customer maybe needs something slightly different than that pilot customer, what you should be looking for is not, can I do this? Should I do this in order to close the pilot? It is there an hypothesis of a repeatable customer behind this? Like we think organizations that look like that have that particular need, and therefore we want to build it in an exchange, to do that. I think that warrants some caution and probably some additional evidence than just the one pilot customer. N of 1 is not really a recipe to success. But at least we need the hypothesis of like, this is what these guys look like. And as soon as that hypothesis is falsified, then take that as falsification of the hypothesis and try to find a new version of that repeatable customer. And don't just say like, well, now this other pilot, they needed something different. And eventually we'll just have this library of plugins that we can all use, and it'll all work out in a wash in the end, because you're really just deluding yourself.
Beautifully said.
All right, so we dive in.
Let's dive in.
All right, so we're going to play our little service as a software platform or project game. And it's the setup's going to work like normal. Cass is going to read us Cass will give it to me and I'll read it, a startup setup. And then we're going to decide whether this is actually a real scalable product or if it's just like a slightly automated agency model, cosplaying as SaaS. So without further ado, let's go. All right. You thought I was going somewhere different than that. I saw it in your face.
All righty. All right. All right.
All right. All right. All right. All right. Let's do it. I did just notice. So when we set up the game, we did not have this built in, but Cass has given us, I guess, just as a bonus, as part of this first round of the game, an index. Cameron's breaking down over there.
Oh no.
I was not expecting it to give us that. So we, all right.
So trademarked it.
It did. It trademarked it. So I feel like we either have to cut this whole section out or we need to say what it is. So what happened was we always set up the game in advance and we run a practice one before we ever hit record, so that way we can see that we're getting like what we need to out of the AI. And we did that. It was fine. But this time, Cass went rogue, and in the first version that I just pulled up live as we're recording this, it just threw in this curveball that it wants us. It seems to like these, like rank it on 0 out of 10, which we've done before, but it is referring to this one as the Sasturbation Index, which is of course a pun you see on SaaS. And it's how delusional is the founder of what they've actually built on the Sasturbation Index. Which I do admit is actually a pretty good pun, but it was better than some of the ones we ideated on, like the Sasquatch.
Yes,
the myth of the Sasquatch. Actually, now that I say that out loud, I think I actually like that one okay as well. Okay, well, all that having been said, are we keeping our index or not, Cam?
Yeah, I don't know that. We'll see, I guess. Or
we'll see.
We have to make a decision now. I don't know. Cass threw us off on this one.
Yeah. All right. Well, sorry for that, everyone. I'm just gonna loosen my collar here.
The Wi-Fi cut out.
Yeah. Sorry. We're back now. Okay. All right. Here we go. Though. Here we go. All right, a customer success automation platform for early stage B2B SaaS teams. The pitch, automate follow-ups, renewal nudges, and onboarding emails without hiring a full customer service team. So customer service automation. Okay. They've got 2 paying beta customers. Cool. Each one uses a different CRM, so the team manually maps the fields and sets up custom workflows via make.com and a bunch of Python scripts. They say the scripts are temporary, but they've been running them for about 4 months. The founder personally rewrites the onboarding copy for each customer just to make sure it's dialed in. Pricing is TBD. They're learning what people will pay. I guess Cass threw us a curveball and decided to embed a number of unrelated red flags in here. Do you want to take the first stab?
So I mean, I thought it started off actually kind of decent. So
yeah,
they had some two paying customers, which then was kind of invalidated at the end related to pricing as TBD. So I'm curious of what they're paying, if they're paying. So that was kind of contradictory there, but maybe it was an intent to pay at different levels. And then
I actually read that as like they've got 2 paying beta customers, but they're paying dramatically different things because pricing's all TBD and they're just trying to figure out what people are going to pay.
Okay, got it.
That's how I read it.
Yeah, got it. Perfect. And then, so, I think that's fair in terms of trying to figure out and relating that to then the value that you're creating for them. And then each one uses a different CRM. I don't think that's as much of an issue because that's going to be probably par for course in the industry. And so it's like, okay, we're mapping tools that maybe associate with HubSpot and a Zoho and all these other different solutions out there. I think where you started to then get to this manual customization was this founder personally writing the onboarding copy for each customer just to make sure it's dialed in. And so, they're not actually bringing in this element of what the value proposition of the output is. So it's like one thing to create the workflows and connections, but the real value is getting the nudges and the content that's coming back to them. And so if they're creating this as like a manual thing, how are they going to ultimately scale that over time? That's kind of where my mind was going as a major gap. If that's the personal nudges that are coming are handwritten, those are likely to have a maybe greater impact than something that's just templated and it's just like a notification that you'd always get. And so I think that those are potential challenges, but I liked the foundation of where they were starting, and it's okay to have two different systems as long as you kind of see that envisioned in your next set of customers. So in terms of the score, I don't know, might be middle of the road. It's not as bad as I would have seen or thought, but I don't know. What are your thoughts?
So here's actually interesting. I'm in either of one of two camps. I am either in this is scrappy and it's early enough that it's fine camp, or in the we're very much not fine camp. And so I'm guessing that that Cass wrote it in the second camp, right? But just by the nature of the game. But let me explain what those two camps are, that I can read this in two different ways. And so one of them is very similar to how you were reading it. Which was like, okay, we've got two paying beta customers. They use different CRMs, and that's the nature of the game because there's 1,000 CRMs after there. That's one of those things where it's highly niche. So there's a number of niche CRMs out there as well as a few big players. So a lot of that's going to depend on your customer avatar, and you can probably be like, all right, well, most of our customers in the early days are going to be using one of these 5 CRMs, because we're after this particular niche. And so like having some custom scripts for those is maybe not too big of a deal, depending on the longer term play there, and like N of 2, so it's fine. And like, okay, they have these scripts are temporary, but they're running for 4 months, but it's 2 paying beta customers. And so like, keep them running for the length of the beta until we figure out some repeatability there. Like, I don't see that as necessarily a big deal. I agree about the onboarding copy that like, okay, yeah, sure. But are we just testing some things out so that we can like kind of figure out what resonates, and that's okay. And then pricing can definitely be a test in there. So like there is that story that I could get out of here. The non-charitable story is a slightly different spin on the same thing. So this is a customer success automation platform for early stage B2B SaaS, and they're automating follow-ups, nudges, and onboarding emails without hiring a full CS team. Okay. And the second little detail that Cass gave us was that each one uses a different CRM, so the team manually maps fields and sets up custom workflows by a make.com and a bunch of Python scripts. So what I think I might be hearing there is that the CRM is doing the work, and they're looking for triggers in the CRM to set up custom workflows back to the CRM. So in other words, their startup, it doesn't exist as its own SaaS product. It exists as a series of scripts on top of other people's SaaS products. Mm-hmm. And if I'm reading it that way, then there's really no repeatability here, because we're actually automating something per customer, per CRM. And like and then you can see like, okay, now if we layer on the founders personally writing this onboarding copy for each customer, now we're starting to see like, okay, what they're actually doing is setting up custom workflows for a sales team in their CRM of choice. And that becomes very much all the way on the service side of the business. So like those are the two ways that I read this same story. And so like which camp they fall into is going to be based, I guess, on a couple of things. So one is there theoretical predictability and repeatability repeatability here that we can find our way to, and so that we have this own tool that for now we've integrated with make.com and some custom Python scripts because, hey, we're gonna be light, we're gonna be scrappy, we're gonna get these beta customers on board so we can actually get some revenue and some real testing and all that stuff. And in which case that's actually fine. You're just using that to connect two systems together or whatever. If alternatively it's not that, and your business is entirely make.com and Python scripts that you're manually having to connect in a customized way for each and every customer, you actually don't even have a theory of repeatability yet. And in that case, you're building a sales enablement, like customer success service business, which is fine, but it's not a venture backable startup.
Yep. I like it. Yeah, it makes me think of that, like, second camp is kind of the feature, not a startup. And we've talked a lot about that. Was like they're building a feature that could be utilized or could be on the roadmap of these CRMs, but not actually this scalable startup going forward.
Yeah, exactly. So like what if you're a founder and you're kind of like on the fence about where you are in this, or trying to make sure that you're not this, remember that when you think about your IP, like your actual IP as a SaaS company is in the repeatability. Like that's where the IP is. And if your IP is entirely about the repeatability, then you're probably okay. And if your IP is not about the repeatability and it's more about how these, integrations work between CRMs and how you can do like custom scripting and API connectivity, through make.com or Zapier or whatever, then you're actually not. Your IP is not in repeatability. It's actually in your own internal processes, and that's not a software as a service company. That's a service as a software company.
Ooh.
Well, do you want to give it a score, or do we skip the score?
Let's skip the score.
Let's skip the score. All right, Cass, let's do another. All right, so we're going to do a round two here. Still actually a service, as how Cass is redescribing the SaaS bit there. And Cass is definitely like doubling down. It's including the index once again in here, just until we actually go with it. Cass is gonna keep adding it in. All right, so this is a smart inventory platform for boutique coffee shops that promises to eliminate waste, reduce ordering errors, and optimize freshness. They've got 4 cafes live. Every week, the founder texts each shop manager asking for their latest inventory numbers and sales. He inputs the numbers into a custom spreadsheet with conditional formatting, which then generates a suggested order. That order gets copy-pasted into an email, which the founder sends manually. The future plan is to build a dashboard, but in the meantime, they're calling it a white glove MVP. What do you think, Cam? Platform or project?
Well, it's so early that it definitely has the nature of this kind of service focused thing, but I'm also then like, is this something that like we often talk about doing, a concierge or the Wizard of Oz? And so part of this isn't a facade of the Wizard of Oz, right? It's being sold as this really white glove concierge service, and so obviously, right, that like the focus of that is service, not necessarily the software component of it. What would be interesting for me is then like transitioning that to more of a Wizard of Oz. And so like, what would that software look like to have that, where instead of it being, the founder texts the shop managers asking for the inventory, is there like an interface where it prompts them to say, hey, you need to enter your inventory numbers and sales, that then, on the back end could be manually put into some, spreadsheet for at least a starting point. But I think the risk I see is that it's currently leaning more towards the service. And so if they continue to repeat it and sell the white glove component of it, they're not building that repeatable kind of software approach versus transitioning from more of that visually it being a service to then what actually this kind of Wizard of Oz facade might look like. So I think it's a little bit early to tell. I don't think they're necessarily, fully down the path of, Sasquatch death for their startup. But I do think if they continue to go from 4 to 10, cafes live with this approach, then they're selling something that's not that repeatable process. But if this is developing and ironing out what that workflow for the software would be, then I'm less opposed to that.
So I agree with everything you just said with one caveat. So
the big caveat, probably.
Well, no, it's not. It's like it's sort of secondary. Like my biggest problem with this, it actually isn't any of the repeatability stuff, but for all the reasons that you mentioned. My biggest problem with this feels like a feature. Mm-hmm. So like we have an input which right now is white glove concierge, and I agree, like a Wizard of Oz would be the next like logical step in that process, right? But you have this input, which is inventory numbers and sales, and then the output is like some intelligent recommendation on suggested ordering. Like that's a feature. And whatever inventory system that they're using now, that would be a feature that would logically be in that product where all that data already exists. And is that product, is it Square, is it Shopify, is it Toast, is it whatever? And so like they already have some system for this, and we're just building a feature that does a suggestion based on the data that system owns. And so like that's a feature. That's my biggest problem with this. And so if this is a feature that is, really just an early MVP, and there's something else that's broader in here that we're just using this feature to wedge into, then I actually think it's a very interesting, very hacky early stage way to do some early validation that then you can then follow, Cameron, the exact path that you mentioned, right? Which is like, well, now let's do Wizard of Oz and see if we can get small amount of interest and scale that way, and then move on from there to see if we can fully automate that into something that's actually repeatable and scalable. But with an eye toward like, how do we move beyond that? Because this feature isn't going to survive on its own in the market.
Right. No, thanks for bringing that in. We're kind of seeing that across this one in the last example as well. And so I think that's part of that early like hacky component. Is that truly like the wedge into the market, or is this, just a limitation of really what you're trying to deliver in value going forward? So
should we do a third one?
Yeah, let's do a quick third one, and then we'll wrap up with some frivolity.
All right, Cass, let's go. Cass is now saying that we're savages and that they are a fan. I didn't feel like we really savaged that one very much. I thought we were polite. We're giving them the benefit of the doubt and everything. All right. This one's a B2B influencer platform that connects niche industry experts with SaaS companies for content co-marketing. Think Cameo meets Gartner hype cycles. Okay. The two pilot clients get access to a Notion database of influencers the founders found manually on LinkedIn. The founders DM each expert to check interest and negotiate a rate on behalf of the client. They send a Google Doc brief and collect deliverables via email. All payments are handled manually over PayPal. They claim the platform is live, but the homepage just has a type form.
You want to kick us off with this one?
Yeah, I honestly, I think we're feeling a bit of a theme here, which like leads me to believe that we could probably prompt Cass to tighten this up a little bit, because I'm seeing again sort of the same thing where I want to be charitable to this one. Subject to some caveats. So an influencer platform that connects niche industry experts with SaaS companies is fine. Like there's a lot of companies that have done that and done that well. I mean, there's a unicorn here in Sacramento that has done that, like, or at least something awfully close. And so like I don't necessarily have an objection to that. That they have this Notion database and powering things off a type form. Hey, Wizard of Oz, don't have any problem with that. The parts of it though that are actually an issue for me are the parts where this is no longer a platform. So a couple things. One, they have no distribution on the influencer side. They actually went out and found influencers and made a list of them. And then only when they find a match do they then DM those influencers. So they have no pull on that side.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that point, I don't know how you break out of the agency model for something like that. Like you actually there needs to be a theory of distribution and growth on that side, or there will never be any scalability. So that to me, there's a big red flag on that side. The other one of like a Google Doc brief, collecting deliverables via email and then handling payments manually over PayPal. I don't care about any of that because all that stuff is stuff you can automate later. Assuming, of course, that the briefs that we're creating are actually ones that are either submitted by the brands, by the SaaS companies, or if they can be generated automatically. Because if you can do that, then I actually don't see really any issue with saying like, okay, we're gonna automate that stuff later. We'll Wizard of Oz it for now, and that's fine. And then claiming that the platform is live, but the homepage just has a type form. I mean, that's just startup, fake it till you make it, Wizard of Oz stuff like that. That's fine. I think the biggest issue here is I don't see a way to do to break out of two things without a better theory than what we have here, which is one, that influencer side of the market where they have literally no distribution at all and it's entirely manual. And then the second part of that where they're actually negotiating rates. That's the part that I see harder too. You're going to have distribution on that side to get a broad range of them so that you can do it bid based. And if you can get to that, then you can take the manual negotiation off the table too, like any ad platform does. And then you have the influencers themselves, looking for brands to connect them with. And if you can figure that part out, then you have something interesting. And if you can't, then you're really only an agency at this point.
Love it. Yeah, I think just to add on top of that is, I'm seeing kind of this theme of like we're in kind of a gray area where like it's early hacky startup, great activity to start to kind of prove out some different components, but then we need to have that like step back of like what does this play in the theory of our overall startup, and what leading indicators do we have to demonstrate that this is repeatable. And so like one of the things that I see as a potential detriment to some of these founders is, say they go pitch to a later stage investor and they're like, we need revenue. And revenue is a great sign of traction, but if you're just building this traction of early revenue related to non-scalable theory, then you're going to be setting yourself up for this potential failure where you are this service as a software company, not a software as a service company. And so giving yourself that permission to do that early validation of some of those leading indicators that will demonstrate that you're on this repeatable process of getting, say, these influencers are on board in a more repeatable fashion, being able to demonstrate the outputs or building out that bid-based system that then is more intentional to a scalable component, might not have as early path to revenue, but it has the foundation of these scalable startup that you're ultimately trying to take to.
Awesome. Well, cool. I think we sort of beat that one here. I think to maybe tie the whole room together with my own little rug, I would say that when we're looking at any of these early hacky ways of prototyping, the Wizard of Oz and the white glove concierge MVPs, all that stuff, they're a means to an end when you're in a scalable startup. And a means to an end has two components to it. It has the means and an end. And if you're just doing like creating this thing in order to see what happens and get some revenue in, then it's not a means to an end. It just is what you're doing, and you're hoping that you're going to find a way out later. You need that theory of what that end looks like, that we're going to do this in order to get to blank. And that is how we exit out of this means that we all agree is not scalable. So I would just bear that in mind, that, and this probably goes for anything. Like if you're considering something to be a means to an end, the difference between the means to an end and just compromising on your goals or on your principles or on your morals or whatever it is whether or not that there's a well-defined end and a strategy for how that means gets you to that end.
Beautifully said.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have for the game here. But this wouldn't be Zero Detraction without some frivolous thoughts. So,
Well, I mentioned mine a little bit in the our startup office hours, but wanted to bring it into ZTT here for some frivolity. But I have come across a new running app called Interval, INTVL, and it definitely is right on par with the thing I need. And basically, it's as you run, you conquer territory, and then you compete against people that live in around you. And say if you're traveling, you can go conquer territory elsewhere. So I've gotten up to 11 miles squared here in the greater Sacramento region. So I'm the king of the area currently in the city of Sacramento. But no, like the fun part of it as well, outside of the instant gratification of claiming territory, is I also find myself going on different routes. So yesterday I took a totally different route that I usually wouldn't run, partly to get the territory, but also kind of forced me to get out of my usual routine. So and it's been cool because I feel like I'm an early adopter on the platform and want to like make recommendations and spread the word. So it's kind of been fun to be on the other side of that.
do you get anything for control of that fiefdom?
So you get entries into raffle for different like running kits. So as you run, you build XP. So you get some points, and then you can apply that to different raffles. So they have like sunglasses, they have Whoop bands, a bunch of different things that. So the more you run, obviously, the more you do, and then yeah, overall, just it's nice to see my color's blue, so at the blue territory that's under my realm.
All right. Well, from one dictatorial territory to another, my frivolous thought is I finally have my wedding ring back.
Nice.
Yeah, it's been more than I think 2 months or something now, and I just got it back. Was that Saturday morning, I think I finally got it back. It's only been a few days. But it would like 2 months is a long time to be without it. And so there was no time in that 2 months where I didn't notice that it was missing, but it had been long enough to where that noticeability had dropped a lot. And so I would notice it, maybe a couple times a day, as opposed to it being constantly like my hand feels off.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I have it back, I'm having to go through the entire cycle again of getting used to it being on my hand. So that does suck. It was in that Goldilocks zone, where I've sort of forgotten it, or the anti-Goldilocks zone. But it is great to have my ring back. It looks as it did when I bought it. It looks brand new, or when we bought it rather. And so it's great. I'm happy to have it back, nice and stylized, fresh back from the manufacturer, for fixing someone else's grievous error in attempting to polish my ring. So can't remember if I talked about that on the show or not.
You did.
I did. Okay, good.
Yeah.
So yeah, that saga is now complete, and I'm once again married and happy.
Yeah, I love it. Awesome. Well,
All right.
congrats on getting your ring back.
Thank you. Yeah, happy to be back. Actually, when I went to pick it up, the woman who helped us out was not the normal person that we interact with, and so we didn't know her. So when as she was just doing the computer paperwork, to transfer something expensive from one party to another, and she's making conversation, and she says, "Oh, you didn't order one of those silicone bands, like from Amazon, since you were going to be without for a couple months?" And I'm like, I wanted to be like, "Lady, my wife is right here."
Yeah, called you out.
She did. She called me out publicly. But anyway, that is all the time we have for Zero Detraction. Time is the one resource we can never get back. Thank you for spending a few minutes of it with us this week. We'll be back in your feeds next week. Who knows what date we will release this episode on, because we're still experimenting with days, and we should be ready in the next day or so to look back at the analytics and see how our experiment performed. But obviously that doesn't matter to you at all, because you know what day this was released and we don't. You are in the future and get the benefit of that hindsight that we do not, and we are jealous for that. Can you tell us the answer? DM us and tell us the answer. When was this episode released, so that we know when to release it now.
Love it. Well, thanks for having us in your ear, and we look forward to seeing when you're listening to it, because we don't know exactly what day. So
remember, podcasts grow by word of mouth. So think of a friend who is in that startup space, and they're maybe looking at some hacky ways to get their startup going, which we strongly encourage founders to do. So find that person, send them this episode, and make sure that they do that well. And we'll be back next week. Cameron, thanks as always. It was fun.
yes, thank you, and thank you all.